without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speakers. Earth and Fire Erowid right over there. They really need no introduction, but I'll try anyway. I'll read the bio for the people. I'm not going to read the summaries of their talks because that's, of course, what they'll be talking about. But we'll read the bios for you. Fire Erowid is Executive Director of the Erowid Center and Head Archivist for Erowid.org. She is the site's primary information architect, designer, and editor, as well as being responsible for fundraising and budget management. Fire has more than 12 years' experience studying psychoactive plants and drugs. She's written hundreds of pages of information about these materials, authored numerous articles, spoken at academic and professional conferences, and has had her work cited by newspapers, education programs, college classes, and seminars around the world. That's Fire. Earth Erowid is Erowid Center's technical director and the chief software engineer of Erowid.org. He designs and implements the custom software systems necessary for managing the large flow of information through the site and is the lead editor responsible for scientific information publishing by Erowid. Earth has worked in the field of psychoactive information distribution for more than 12 years and has written extensively on the topic. He has authored academic posters, been published in both large and small publications, and been interviewed by major news organizations about his work. These folks are researchers, the librarians of the field, if you will, catalogers, enablers in the best sense, conduits, really, and a precious resource to us all. So I'm going to turn you over to Earth and Fire. And thank you again for coming.
This will be lovely, right there. Morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to the early show. Our State of the Stone talks kind of morph and carry on traditions started by Terence McKenna when he gave a series of talks he called State of the Stone. They were kind of more wide-ranging, but they included updates on new drugs and kind of the current state of psychedelic stuff.
The world is changing pretty quickly these days, and the world of drugs is even faster, with new developments continually being made in chemistry, botany, types of use, law enforcement, distribution methods, everything.
We began the Erowid project with the idea of collecting the existing knowledge about psychedelics and other recreational drugs in order to help to make sure that people in high school and college don't have to rely solely on their peers to make decisions about the plants and chemicals that they're going to ingest.
So a big part of our work is tracking all of those various trends and trying to distribute that information. So what we're going to do today is sort of do a quick walk through what's current and new.
There's been a lot of news in the last 2 weeks, and so we're going to be kind of jumping through some stuff pretty fast. Quick noted sort of. How many people, show of hands, sort of are familiar with spice and the kind of synthetic cannabinoid craziness? Okay, good. So most people, not everybody, but most people. This is just a quick rundown of the last sort of 6 or 7 years, kind of new stuff that's been going on.
2006 through 2009, the spice and synthetic cannabinoids were a really big new market, slick packaged cannabinoids being sold in convenience stores around the world.
The last couple of years, it's been there's been additional euphoric stimulants, cathinone stimulants, and the Enbome series, and now Crocodile.
In 2008 and 2009, a whole lot of both the bath salts and plant foods, as well as the synthetic cannabinoids, were being sold in the wide variety of corner stores. That's a very big new trend in that short time period from in the last 5 years, 6 years, I guess.
The last time we talked at Horizons a few years ago, the slick packaging, the Mylar packaging things were really big. It was, kind of pretty much any convenience store around the United States had some kind of strange, slickly packaged psychoactive drug. And that is kind of going away. It's now a little more reserved to head shops and things like that, but it's definitely a little still kind of dribbling along.
And one of the things that's sort of notable about those markets is that a lot of the materials that were being sold then, and still true to some degree now, very pure chemicals that are being sold. And so a slightly different market than the underground black market. This is a sample of methoxetamine, which is a ketamine analog that we got tested in 2011. And the top chart up there, you can see that there's basically a single chemical present. It's extremely pure material being shipped to people's doors.
But there's obviously the problem that if one buys something from the online markets and things like that, you don't ever really know for sure what you're getting unless it gets analyzed. And so this is from a group that we really like, Exchange Supplies, which is in Britain, and they actually get funding from the government in Britain, and they produce kind of amusing, cartoonish documentation about like a lot of weird stuff, heroin stuff, buprenorphine, IV injection guides and things like that, but they also cover research chemical world.
And they're sort of playing on the fact that though a lot of the materials that are being sold are extremely pure, there have been a lot of issues with the wrong pure chemical coming mislabeled. And so it's a very different harm reduction issue to have contamination versus pure misidentified materials.
So in 2011, in the United States, a bunch of the synthetic cannabinoids got controlled. They'd already been controlled in 2010 by a few countries, and they continue to kind of slowly come out. More new synthetic cannabinoids are available, and then this year the DEA scheduled 3 more, but there are continuing to be more out there. The echo's a little strange.
It is pretty weird up here. But there are still smoking blunt vendors that are up and running both in the U.S. and around the world. These days often proclaiming on the packaging that there's no DEA banned substances in them. They don't actually identify what is in them, nor would any of us probably recognize the names of the chemicals if you heard what they were.
Legal in all 50 states. New blend of K2. The EMCDDA is one of the more important kind of drug information sources. They're a European monitoring center for drugs and drug addiction, and they're a little bit more on the law enforcement side, but they do quite a lot of interesting information collection. And this is a chart from the last few years, 2005 through 2012. This is their latest data. That's showing the number of brand new substances which had never been previously identified by them, never been in their books before.
So in 2006, there were only 8 new substances that they identified, and in 2012, there were 73. I believe this year, 2013, as of the middle of the year, they were on track to be higher than 73, more like 100. Brand new, never before identified substances that they're seeing available for sale online to the public.
This is, you could describe it.
This is a chart that shows the top substances available by the number of shops that were selling them as of, there's 3 different numbers there for January, July of 2011, and then January of 2012. So the top substance that was available was kratom, which I actually thought was interesting, and then salvia divinorum, psychoactive mushrooms, methoxetamine, MDAI. There's 179 stores that were selling kratom in January of 2012 that, of course, EMCDDA found, as opposed to, I was probably double that, I would guess, if they knew where to look.
Kratom is the common name for Mitragyna speciosa. It's a plant that grows natively in Southeast Asia, and it's been available in the United States as a productized material for over 10 years now. But over the last few years, it's gone into these kind of slick mylar packaging, and it's getting used by both people who want to use it recreationally as well as a way to stop the withdrawal suffering associated with opioids. It's kind of a quasi-opioid, mu-opioid agonist, I think. This
is just a photo that we took last week in Chicago as we were walking by a head shop. We stepped in the door, and there's kratom on the top shelf.
Captain Kratom.
Captain Kratom, yeah. And the one on the right there, actually, I don't know if you can see it from where you are, it says Mojo Pimp Kratom.
Pimp Kratom.
Pimp Kratom.
I guess that's the good stuff right there.
I have no idea what that means.
There's, so MDMA, everyone knows MDMA probably, and a bunch of the euphoric stimulants, the cathinone stimulants that have been coming out of the last 5-6 years are chemical variants of MDMA or share a structure. And this is just to sort of show that how similar that they are.
So MDPV is one of the substances that has been being sold as bath salts that have been getting a lot of media over the last few years.
One of the curious things about the market and this is still going on, is these products sometimes are actually products that continue over years, but change what's in them over time.
Because they don't actually identify on the packaging what the chemical is, they just have a brand name. It doesn't really matter whether it stays the same. So this is actually an example of a product that was called Charge, that in March 2010, a group called Energy Control in Spain did analysis of the product and found that it contained lidocaine and the psychoactive chemical 4-FMC. And then a year later, in February of 2011, they tested it, and they had added caffeine to the product. And then in May of 2011, they checked it, and they had completely changed it to caffeine and MDPV. So the same product being sold in the same packaging, containing different chemicals. I mean, in this case, over a 3-month period, it completely changed what was in it. And we actually don't know for sure, but the dosages of MDPV and 4-FMC are very different. We presume that they actually are padding one in order to make the dosage in the package. Hopefully, the package is always 1 dose or 2 doses. We don't actually know how that worked.
A fellow contacted us and said, I've had depression and chronic pain for a really long time, and I've been taking this stuff, this plant food stuff, and my depression's gone away, I've lost a lot of weight, I'm back at work, and I'm really excited about it, and now here's this product. He sent us photos of it, and then he eventually actually sent us some samples to test.
And he wanted to know what was in it. And he actually said that he had been using a substance called MDPV in Florida, but Florida had actually made MDPV illegal, and so he had started using this new product, which seemed like it was kind of the same, but he didn't really know, and so he wanted to get it tested to find out what was in it. And the label says on it in tiny little print, this product does not contain, and then lists however many that is, like 30, 5-MeO-DMT, methadone, ketamine, just names all of these psychoactive drugs that it does not contain, including MDPV, which it has, I believe, in italics and bolded on it, because of course MDPV had been made recently illegal, and so he sent the sample in, and we got it tested through our lab, and it contains a single active chemical, MDPV, which is listed on the package as it not containing it. So
it's a pretty complicated world, and one of the things that continues to be true, unfortunately, is that the mainstream sources of information kind of fail. That even the better sources, news sources, often either get stuff wrong or are so bent on making sure that no one could misunderstand them as endorsing any of this unseemly behavior, that they're willing to quote people saying the stupidest things. So the New York Times quoted this fellow as saying, if you take the worst attributes of meth, coke, PCP, LSD, and ecstasy and put them together, that's what we're seeing sometimes, referring to bath salts. And of course, if you took all of the worst qualities of those drugs, no one would take it, right? It's pretty straightforward.
So one of the really terrible media crazes is the bath salt zombies. I'm sure most of you probably have seen some of that media, but there was a particular case where there was a guy who seemed to go a little insane and attacked another guy, and then there was a lot of media about him having bit him, and it was bath salt zombies. He must have been on bath salts, and I believe it was the police chief stated to the media that they were really suspicious that he had been on bath salts. So every media outlet had news about that. None of them pretty much reported later on when they found out that he had a little bit of cannabis in his system and nothing else. There was no evidence that he had taken MDPV or bath salts. They were just basically making that up. But the bath salt zombie meme continued on for a really long time.
And even after the police announced that they had found no trace of any other drug other than probably had smoked cannabis a few days before, or maybe had eaten some a week before. Even though they had found no MDPV, the thing continued. This weird zombie meme continued. And
then there were additional cases of people attacking people, and everybody was speculating that all of them were bath salt related.
And it got kind of so big that like the CDC started playing on some of the zombie stuff, and actually like included in their some press releases that there's no zombie apocalypse and people should not be worried. And Then, very irritatingly, in June last year, just after the police had announced that there was no MDPV found in this fellow, Congress then added MDPV to Schedule 1 to make sure that...
Riding on the sort of wave of the media attention that it had been getting.
The main thing that is obvious from our work is that it doesn't really matter why people don't sleep. If people don't sleep for 2 nights in a row, whether it's they keep taking LSD, or they take bath salts, or they take methamphetamine, or
they just stay
just
up.
having a panic attack, right? Lack of sleep makes people crazy and stupid, and just go to sleep. Stop taking the drugs. It's a pretty crazy world out there right now. This year we're on track for somewhere between according to EMCDDA, 80 and 100 brand new substances, and it's pretty hard to keep track of. Like, we spend a lot of our time managing groups of volunteers who track new drugs that are available from vendors and surf the forums, and we're friends with the forum people, and it's a lot to keep track of.
One of the new drugs that's been getting a lot of media attention just in the last couple of weeks is actually Crocodile. So it's desmorphine. It's an opiate that was first seen in Russia. It's getting attention because it has really sloppy synthesis from codeine, and so it's basically very impure as it hits the streets. And people are injecting it, and basically it turns out that if you inject really impure things, a lot of really bad things can happen. And so there's a lot of skin issues, like actually body degradation through there being bad chemicals left over from the synthesis process.
Codeine is pretty easy to get around the world, relatively speaking, and there's a kind of a crappy meth synthesis like method that can take codeine and turn it into desmorphine, which is then a little longer acting and a little more fun than codeine, but.
And just to follow on the bad media model, just this morning there was a brand new media article called "Zombie Drug Gives High, Rots Skin" about Crocodile. So they just love the zombie meme. So just basically, it can't be MDPV. Okay, apparently it's Crocodile is the zombie drug.
Everybody loves zombies. Who doesn't love zombies?
So one of the outcomes of there being so many new drugs and such broad use and difficulty in tracking it is that there's actually a new model of testing for levels of use of various drugs in a city through testing the wastewater system, because they can detect quite low concentrations of drugs. The idea is that you can basically just go to the wastewater treatment center and test and see whether the levels of cocaine are going up or down over the course of a year. And so the first international conference on detecting, monitoring, and estimating the use of illegal drugs through wastewater testing took place in May of this year. So a whole conference on testing wastewater for drugs.
I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with one of the projects that we run is called Ecstasy Data, and it's actually a project that we have a DEA licensed lab that we work with. People can submit anonymous samples to, and for tablets, we charge $40, and for powders, we've been charging $140, although this month the copay will go down to $100 because we've got a sponsor who's helping us pay for that. We subsidize about $12,000 a year in testing costs in order to try to make this thing happen, and we think it's one of the most important projects just in terms of we would like to see in the United States people be able to test the substances that they're taking, so that they know what it is that they're taking.
We've been seeing a lot. It's interesting. We've been seeing a lot more non-tablet samples being sent in as the research chemical market is getting bigger and bigger. A lot of people sending in just white powders to say, is what I bought what I think I bought? So we're getting a lot more of that.
So, probably if you're from this area, you've definitely got inundated by Molly news. Over the Labor Day weekend, there were a few deaths associated with a couple of big parties in the Northeast. And, just even though Molly is not actually a brand new term, the media seems to have lost track of looking up things on Wikipedia, and so we actually got contacted by by 7 different fairly sizable media organizations to talk to them about this new thing, Molly. And over a few days after Labor Day weekend, there were 150 stories that we counted talking about Molly, and around half of them got it wrong. It's not that complicated, but it turns out that new terminology is a little confusing, and common names are just sort of naturally imprecise.
And one of the big things that I think is sort of new about the slang name Molly is that traditionally it has been used to describe pure-ish powdered MDMA. More recently, it has started being used to mean powdered other psychedelic and/or pathogenic stimulants. And so, let's see, I guess we can switch to these. We have had 80, through Ecstasy Data, through testing that we've done, as well as through testing results that we collect from a couple of other groups, in particular Energy Control in Spain. We've had 80 different samples that have gotten tested of materials that were submitted as Molly since 2000. And over the last, let's see here, over the last 18 months, we just did an analysis last night, the samples are just about equally likely to be methylone as they are to be MDMA. There's a few other substances that are also showing up as Molly in powder, but methylone is the primary one that we're seeing that is about as common as MDMA.
One of the things that's a little complicated, confusing for young people, or anybody really, is that if you buy something that's pure and it gets sold as Molly, and it's methylone, it's actually possible that one would consistently get something that is methylone in a baggie sold as Molly. And methylone's dosages are higher, so even if one were weighing the material, it might be reasonable to take 200 milligrams of methylone for an evening and not be too high. But starting out with 200 milligrams, if you then buy another baggie of Molly and it turns out to be MDMA, you take 200 milligrams, it might be way too much, especially if you take 2 doses or whatever.
And so the deaths that we are aware of that have had their results, toxicology results published, we know that one of them was supposedly just pure MDMA, but the person took 6, so we don't know 6 what exactly, but 6 hits, tablets presumably, which is quite conceivably a very high dose. And another one of them was MDMA in combination with methylone, so we don't know if that was powder or if that was tablets that contained both or what.
The easiest way to test things is in your own home or at a party, and the reagents are available from a variety of different companies that people can use to do field tests. And there's no way to use a field test to absolutely confirm what a substance is or to verify that there are no contaminants, but it's a way that one can rule out certain things.
Reagent tests are available on Amazon. And in the crazy world of 2013 and online sales of things, Amazon
helpfully provides a list of other products that you might be interested in.
So people who bought drug testing reagents on Amazon also bought naphtha, 5-HTP, milligram scales,
cannabis grinders,
P-Col and T-Col by the Shulgins,
whipped cream chargers and empty gel caps,
the Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, earplugs,
glow sticks,
and 1,000 tiny Ziploc bags.
So one of the things that's been in the news for the last couple of weeks is Silk Road. How many people have heard of Silk Road before? How many people have not heard of Silk Road before?
Okay, good.
A few. It's a little difficult to describe, but it's basically there's an encryption system called Tor that people can use to visit sites anonymously, and Silk Road was a site that you could only visit through this anonymizing system called Tor. It was shut down a week and a half ago by the FBI, who is supposedly shut down or whatever, the government shutdown thing, but they seem to still be working.
How many people actually installed Tor and figured out how to visit Silk Road in order to look at what they had for sale? A few. Okay, good.
Yeah, some.
It was a little bit of a technical. You had to choose.
You had to be willing to try. You have to be willing to try. But one of the things about Silk Road that was interesting and disturbing was that it wasn't just a place that one could go and buy things. It was also included a set of forums, and the forums were particularly. It made me a little uncomfortable whenever I visited Silk Road, not because I was afraid for myself, but it was sort of a little
Unusual.
agitating to read the level of public discourse about buying and selling illegal drugs. And so the forums included vendor forums where there was like feedback going where, oh, I bought heroin from Jim and it was really good, but I bought it from Sandy and whatever, and it wasn't as good, and vendor forums where they were discussing ways of shipping things so that they wouldn't get caught, including clean room techniques and making sure that their DNA didn't show up in the envelopes, and actually talking about going to other, like if you ever go on a trip, make sure to collect carpet samples and carpet fiber samples and pollens and dust and things like that from where you go, and then put that in your envelope so that if
throw off the FBI.
If anybody ever, if your DNA happens to show up, it will show up mixed with stuff that doesn't make any sense. Anyways,
So those markets have been, I think he's jumped down. Okay, good.
So
We're going to keep it for a little late. So one of the things that's been being sold across the internet and the Silk Road-like markets has been a substance called 2,5-I and Bome, or 2,5-I for short. And what's most notable, it's a psychedelic phenethylamine, and what's most notable about it is that its dosages are extremely low, sort of half a milligram, 500 micrograms. A little higher than LSD, but not a lot higher. So it's small enough dosage to actually be able to fit on blotter. And
this is just a photo of a couple capsules showing 1 milligram at the bottom of a capsule, which is a little bit like a water spot, 10 milligrams, which is definitely enough to see and handle, and then 100 milligrams, which is actually pretty easy to handle. But it's very difficult, and it's really kind of inappropriate for teens to be able to buy grams of stuff that's active at under a milligram.
There have been a lot of issues based on that because people are used to the idea that a white powder, snorting a small line of it will be fine, for example, and that's actually caused deaths because a line is a huge amount of 2,5-I. And most notably, I think that 2,5-I is now available on blotter, and so it used to be blotter was pretty much LSD. We're generally guessing, but it seems like there's half of the blotter that's randomly going around.
At the summer festivals this year in the United
It's probably
States?
2,5-I instead of LSD. There's a lot of it. We have done some testing through Ecstasy Data as well as through the Energy Control Group as well. And do we have the numbers here? I don't know that we do. I think it was 40% of the
Samples
blotter.
blotter sold as acid in Spain this summer. 40% showed up as containing the N-Bome compounds instead of LSD.
There have been dozens of known publicized deaths around the world. DEA has announced that it recorded 14 known deaths in the U.S. 11 of those are from direct pharmacological effects, and 3 of them were from behavioral fatalities. So I think people getting injured to the point of death because they were really, really high.
On Thursday, the DEA announced a 1-month waiting period before they will temporarily schedule the N-Bome compounds. Then that's emergency scheduled for a while, and then it will be permanently scheduled after that. I think let's jump past that.
I can't jump.
Waiting. 3D printing school.
Jump one more.
Yep. So there's a lot of different responses around the world to this phenomenon of lots of new drugs. The primary response around the world is to continue banning things, that prohibition will carry us through this terrible time. In Russia, they decided to ban the information. So there's a list of banned sites in Russia that are, Russia does not have a China firewall kind of thing, but they have a list of sites that are domains that ISPs are legally obligated to block, and Erowid is now part of that list. In Britain, they're implementing an adult content filter, which is supposed to be implemented by default by all ISPs, and it's not clear exactly what will be blocked through that yet, but we are kind of expecting that eventually the drug information websites will be blocked based on political decision-making.
But then in the U.S., obviously, 2 states have recently legalized cannabis, so that's sort of a different direction. Is you pick the least harmful of the materials and start to try to back off on the law enforcement of those.
One of the things I think it's really interesting over the last year since Washington and Colorado legalized cannabis is it really looks to us like it's now pretty clear for the next few years that history has decided that cannabis legalization will be moving forward. And the people who are the prohibitionists who are against cannabis legalization are now feeling like they're on the wrong side of history. And there's a discussions.
There's a conference that's going, I can't remember exactly when it is, but it's later this year, maybe early next year. That's a conference dedicated towards trying to continue with the prohibition of cannabis. And they're actually going to the trouble of researching the people who signed up for tickets and actually refunding money to people. They are disallowing anybody who is pro-cannabis from coming to the conference. So there's actually been a lot of discussion about it because people bought tickets to go and then got their money refunded and their tickets taken away because they're having a hard time actually filling the conference with people who are against cannabis, and instead they're getting a lot of people who are going to come, I'm sure, and I don't know if they were going to
smoke weed.
What they were going to do, probably.
One of the most interesting things going on in the world, from our opinion, our viewpoint, is in New Zealand, that they're actually trying something pretty different. Now, it's unclear how well this is going to go, but it was signed into law in July. It's called the Psychoactive Substances Act, and it creates a category for legal drugs, legal recreational drugs. And they have already approved several drugs to be manufactured and distributed. And the main thing that's interesting about this is that instead of prohibiting everything that comes along, the theory is you allow some things to be sold, require labeling on the package so that people can report back any problems that come up, and then ban the ones or disallow the sale of the ones that actually hurt people. That maybe over time we would actually be able to have some social tonics, I think is one of the terms that's used, that would be legal.
And so just in the end, I think that one of the things that we're doing to try to work with the vast number of psychoactives that are available and how to deal with that in the modern world is to try to move forward in developing the idea of a wisdom cycle, of gathering the knowledge that is learned by people who have tried the various substances, who have worked with them throughout their lives, who feel as though they've had a good life experience with them, and learn from them what has created that positive experience and what makes for a healthy relationship with psychoactive drugs, and then try to pass that on to younger generations. And so we've been working on a survey, the Wisdom Cycle Survey Project, which is going to be a series of surveys. At this point in time, what we're doing is surveying elders about their experiences and trying to gather their knowledge, and we're going to be continuing to do that work. I think we have to.
This is the early results from just this pilot survey that asked people partially for their life experiences, but also asked them what we should ask other people about. And one of the interesting things was that 93% of the people that we asked thought that psychedelics and pathogens can play a beneficial role in one's life. And so hopefully we'll be finding out how to describe what works for people and what doesn't work for people. So that's questions.
Join me in thanking Earth and Fire Erowid. Thank you very, very much. One of the things that we do with Horizons is we always make sure we have a good amount of time for Q&A. The speakers don't like it actually because we ask them to keep it to 30 minutes, but we know that you folks sitting here have a nice opportunity to interact with the folks on stage. So remember, a question is an interrogative, something that usually ends with your voice going up, as opposed to a personal statement. So try to keep those to a minimum. Anybody have a question for Earth and Fire Erowid? Raise your hands. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. In the back.
Thank you. Really, really well done. Just two short questions. One, for outside resources, who do you really like to hear, like the European Monitoring Council and the Dawn Future Survey? Of those outside resources, who are some of your favorites and most accurate? And the other question is, of all these new synthetics coming out, which are the drug classes or the specific drugs that scare you the most in terms of harm reduction and what's happening in the wild? I know it's a tough one, but you're experts, so you can play with it.
Good. So what surveys do we like best about drug use? And then what drugs are we most afraid of?
Correct.
Good. Well, there are a couple of fairly large-scale surveys of what drugs people use in the United States, and there's a few others in other countries. The United States probably has the best one, and my favorite is Monitoring the Future, which is started in the 1970s and asks students in high school, I guess 10th
grade they start.
8th, 10th, and 12th grade, and then they actually take a subset of the people that they've surveyed in 12th grade and continue to follow up with them. So they do a longitudinal thing. So they've been following some people from the mid-1970s through today. And
one of the things that's really interesting about there is the recanting rates.
Right.
So because they've been following people over a long period of time, they actually are able to track. So let's say you ask an 8th grader, have you ever used LSD? And then you ask them in 9th grade and 10th grade and 11th grade and 12th grade, and then I think it's every 5 years, maybe after that.
3 and then 5. I think.
Sometime in their late 30s or mid 40s, a lot of people start saying, no, I've never tried LSD, even though they previously filled out on the survey that they had tried LSD. And so it's sort of an interesting tracking of what the data probably means if you just ask people who are 40 if they ever took LSD, because people are in the middle of their careers and they don't really want to write down on a piece of paper, rightfully so, that they took a particular drug. But by doing it through a longitudinal process, they are actually able to see what that level is of how many people lie later.
A lot of the surveys are pretty complicated because in terms of taking the results and actually extrapolating them to the whole population, which they almost always do, because a lot of the surveys aren't really anonymous and there's no trust built up. So like somebody, what used to be called the National Household Survey, now called the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, they go to people's homes and then ask them questions about their illegal drug use.
They go to people's homes and ask kids questions in front of their parents.
So you can't always interpret the results straightforwardly. In terms of drugs that we are afraid of, it's pretty much any new drug, anything that's really brand new in the last couple of years shouldn't be available to the public in some ways. I mean, in some ways
not quite as many people should be trying it because it's what they can get easily. They don't really.
It's a little bit like using teens as lab rats, which is okay, sort of, better than using me as a lab rat. But I think that some of the ones that I'm most concerned about are actually some of the downers, some of the things which are central nervous system depressants. There are some PCP analogs that are a little concerning in terms of how people are using them. But
I've also been concerned about the embomes. I mean, the combination of the extremely low doses, the presenting them on blotter and having a lot of that sold as acid so that people don't really know exactly what they're taking, and deaths it seems like deaths are happening at 5 to 10 times what the dose that people are wanting to take. Now 5 to 10 times a normal dose of LSD doesn't really cause death ever, and so people are not really aware that 3 or 4 hits of blotter could conceivably contain too high of a dose of a brand new of a substance. And so, I've been watching that and not really liking it. Now I don't know if emergency scheduling it is the right answer, but it's what happened.
Other questions? Other questions, Miss?
Yes, I just have 2 questions just because I've never heard of it before. What exactly is methadone, and what are the odds that today getting LSD, that's really what you're going to get? And how would you be able to tell?
So methadone.
Methadone is a euphoric stimulant that is MDMA-like in terms of general class. Its dosage range is sort of in the 100 to 250 range per dose. People sometimes often redose. That's not necessarily recommended. I'm just saying what people do. I'm not really sure what else to say about it. It's been quite popular.
And in terms of how likely blotter acid is to be? I mean, on blotter, is that the question? As far as LSD?
One of the things about like a lot of the distribution is LSD specifically, it's a network problem. It's not like if you're a person, if you live next door to a person with a kilogram of LSD, they're going to do everything they can to keep you from knowing about that. And so you might be really, really close to really good LSD, but if you're outside the network of distribution, you won't get it. And so in terms of guessing like if you go to a random festival and go shopping by listening to people yelling doses or whatever, it's hard to guess
it's really hard to guess.
But there's a lot more LSD now than there was 7 years ago on the streets, but in the 90s it was really easy to get relatively reliable LSD, and it's not anymore.
Another question over here, Stephen.
Don't point to me.
Good morning. In your estimation, how well do you think the drug testing market is keeping up with newer, I guess,
Like urine testing?
synthetics or impurities, and are they keeping up?
For urine testing? Is that the idea?
Yeah, personal
good.
testing.
Well, they're always, it's a big commercial market, and they're always trying to keep up. They're trying to advertise new services and sell new products and things like that. And so they are always working to do that. The government approved things that like bus drivers and folks like that have to get tested for are a more limited set and changes much more slowly. But
It's also the standard test that most employment tests would test for. They're not keeping up very much. I mean, they continue to develop tests that will test for newer substances, but they aren't used generally. That those tests are not generally used. And so, if there's some particular reason for law enforcement or an employer to suspect a particular strange new research chemical, it's possible they could test for it. But if you just are doing standard employment testing, they're not testing for any of the new substances.
One more question.
oh, this one.
Sir.
Yeah, I'm curious if the 2,5-I was named because it's similar to LSD 25.
No, it's actually a chemical variant of, so it's, another name for it is 2CB
Or 2CI.
Enbome or 2CI Enbome, and so it's actually a variant of 2CI. And so it's not.
The 2C compounds have this sort of extra wing attached, which makes them much more potent in a kind of LSD-like way. But the 2,5 is related to the counting where things attach to each other. It's not related to.
And second, have you guys followed the money on who's actually making all these synthetics and putting them in the glossy packaging?
I couldn't understand the question.
Have you followed the money to see who's actually packaging these things irresponsibly?
Well, unfortunately it's pretty common. The Silk Road was a big source of pre-dosed blotter that was specifically, people were selling on Silk Road stuff to be sold as acid. It had like Albert Hoffman bicycle ride blotter and other things which were very clearly LSD designed blotter designed to hold LSD that then got dosed with the Enbome compounds. But
there's also been a lot of Silk Road blotter that was being sold with 2,5-I on it, was being sold specifically labeled as 2,5-I, but then how many, a couple people down the chain and you've got blotter, and who wants 2,5-I instead of LSD, so you just say it's LSD instead, and so it's hard to know exactly where that's all happening.
Because of the potency of the substances, the higher the potency of the substance, the easier it is to get a lot of doses through customs or through mail. And so, a standard letter envelope goes up to 28 grams in it. And so one imagines that one can fit 15 grams of material in a letter envelope pretty easily. And 15 grams of 2,5-I Enbome is 25,000 doses or something like that. And so it's actually what has been quite easy for people to buy stuff legally and then
Do what they want with it.
do what they want with it.
Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to help me thank Earth and Fire Erowid. Thank you so much.